Most people will tell you that certifications are a waste of time. However, I'm going to tell you why it really makes sense to get your ISTQB certification. In general, I have hired hundreds of people over my career, and I can tell you that your resume gets very little attention from either HR or from the hiring manager. And in general, if you're lucky, you're going to get about 8 to 10 seconds of my time. So it's really important to make sure that you make things stand out. And to me, in my professional opinion, the ISTQB certification is the thing that really gets my attention. It tells me a lot of things about you even before you've said anything. So if you have that certification on your resume, it really resonates with me. So the ISTQB certification has common language, common terms. So if I tell you we're talking about a test case, then you essentially know what I'm talking about because the vocabulary is all the same. And I also know that you are taking your profession and your career seriously. So you've invested time and effort not only to study, but to take the certification and probably spend your own money as it relates to using the certification. And in addition to that, there's a lower chance or lower risk in hiring because you have the fundamentals, you have the knowledge, and so there's less ramp up time as it relates to bringing somebody on board and hiring them. So there's also this global vendor neutral standard, right? So the ISTQB certification is consistent. It talks the same language. There's really vendor neutral aspects of it. So this isn't tied to any specific company. It's all neutral from that perspective. And there's also a very structured scheme in terms of the certifications. So, and we will dive into these, but in general, there's a foundation certification, there's an advanced level, there's special levels, and there's expert levels. So essentially, why it matters to me is because if I see your certification on your resume, I'm going to stop and pause. If I don't see a certification, then I'm just going to continue. And I may put your resume to the side, but definitely having that certification helps move you to the top. So we've talked about this before a little bit, but things like test planning, test design, different levels, different types, having the basics are critical and key. We can also talk about more expanded topics around risk, coverage, and defects without having to do a lot of translation. And really, ramp up speed, ramp up time is super important. So if we can eliminate these discrepancies around vocabulary, then we can accelerate your hiring process. And it also tells me again that you have initiative, you have discipline. So you took the time to research which certifications you wanted to achieve. You took the time to study. You took the time to pay for the certification, and you were disciplined, right? So you took your own time. It wasn't as you were working probably during the day. It was probably nights and weekends to really study, to prep, and then go take the test itself. So there's basically several levels. Your foundation level is your lower entry point. So it's really, you have to get these core principles and practices and really prerequisites. So especially to me, if you have either a specialist or an advanced or even an expert, it really tells me that you have gone way above and beyond. So while the foundation is important and why it's critical, What really catches my eye are those who have either advanced, specialist, or expert level expertise as it relates to these certifications. So the foundation level is the base, right? So without the base, and in this case, it's the CTFL, this is the first level and the first thing that you need to start with. And so these are usually for people who are either new in their career or early in their career, have that level of expertise. And this relates to different test fundamentals. So the testing process, how do you do test design? How do you cover tools? And the test itself is really a multi-choice exam. So you often have to pick the best answer. There may be one or two answers that could fit, but usually picking the best one and really moving forward. So you don't have to worry about an essay. It's really pretty straightforward. It's multiple choice, and it's fairly easy once you get into the routine of the exam itself. It'll usually go pretty quickly. I do recommend taking some of the tests. They have different tests that you can take. And so I highly recommend doing practice exams multiple times so that you can feel comfortable with the format and you don't really stress or have any problems as it relates to that. Now, once you have your foundation, then you specialize. So for me, for example, I took the test manager route. So I took the test manager, advanced test manager, and I have that certification. And then if you are more of an automation engineer, there's an automation engineer track. If you want to be more of a test analyst and understand the fundamentals of test design and analysis from both a business perspective and a requirement side, then you would take the test analyst role. In addition to that, and we're going to dive into these in other subsequent videos, but the one that really catches my eye right now is the AI testing specialist and then the generative AI testing specialist. In addition to that, if you wanted to be more focused on performance testing or agile testing or automation, then you can take some of these specialist exams. I also see that there's a DevOps one. So if you wanted to be more informed about CI/CD and some of those principles, then you can do that. In addition to that, you've got things like mobile app. So if you're testing mobile app, or if you want to be more specialized in terms of security or even user acceptance testing. So as you can see, there's a very broad foundation of these different specialist certifications that you can do a deeper dive in specific areas in order to gain that expertise. And really the green ones, as they're highlighted here, are the ones that are most newest and probably the ones that are in most demand. So definitely as you dive in, the AI certs definitely get my attention. So I do not currently have the CTAI or CT Gen AI, but these are the ones that I'm going to pursue next because those are the ones that are getting a lot of attention in the marketplace. And these would be extremely valuable. If I saw these on your resume, then I would really know that you're serious, you want to continue your career, and you are paying attention to AI, you know the importance of it, and that you're really trying to get to that next level. So if I were you, here's basically where I'd start. If you're new to testing or if you've been in testing, then you definitely want to get the foundation level. That really helps a newer person or a beginner to have those foundational level concepts. And this one to me is non-negotiable. So if I look at your resume and I see that you may not have a whole lot of experience, but you have the certification, then that is going to get my attention, and I'm going to know that you're serious about your career as a software tester. Now, if you've been in testing for a few years, and maybe you have your CTFL, but if you don't have an advanced or specialized certification, either around Agile, in this case automation, or even AI, then I may look at somebody who has those advanced ones, and they would get a higher priority in terms of the interview or capabilities. Now, if you want to do the manager track, but you don't have management experience, to me, if you go to your boss and say, hey, look, I am thinking about becoming a manager later in my career, do you recommend that I go ahead and get my test manager certification? And 9 times or 10 times out of 10, they're going to tell you, yes, that is something that I think you should pursue. And then if you want to make sure that you have expertise in AI, or if there's AI jobs out there, and even if you don't have AI on your resume, it is a good idea to go ahead and get these certifications. And these are super rare, right? They just came out this year. So those who have those versus those who don't are definitely going to stand out to me as a hiring manager, as an example. So it's really important, and this is where people get a bit sideways, right? People think that if you get the certification but don't have the job experience, this is where people get a little frustrated. Now, if you have both, then to me, you're gonna get in front of the hiring manager. The hiring manager is gonna see that. You're gonna get the interview. There's no doubt about that to me, right? So you have to have a balance of both certification and job expertise. And depending on which role you're looking at, that is really going to set you apart. Now, in addition to this certification, I want to see on your resume, have you been able to find bugs? And I also want to know, not only can you find bugs, but how have you found bugs, right? I also want to see, for example, if we are using Playwright in the current project. Like, I would like to see that you have hands-on Playwright experience and automation experience if I'm hiring you for an automation role. In addition to that, I may throw a question out there as a hiring manager to tell me about a situation where you've disagreed with the developer. How have you handled that to basically get them to understand or know that this bug is definitely valid? So how have you handled that type of things? And in general, I want to know, do you like to break things, or are you curious about how something works? Do you want to do a deep dive? So these are some things to keep in mind, as even if you have the certification, I want you to have the certification, and I want you to have the expertise, ideally, if I'm looking to hire somebody. So it's important to have that balance and really that understanding. So it really helps if you don't have the experience on the flip side of it, but you have the certification, then that proves to me that you're willing to go the distance, right? So if you're a functional tester, for example, you want to get into automation or you want to get into AI, if you go ahead and get that certification, then the hiring manager or the manager that you currently have is more willing to give you opportunities from that perspective. So it doesn't necessarily replace the experience. It doesn't really guarantee that you're going to get a raise. It doesn't guarantee that you're going to be in more of a senior level position, but it really gets my attention and it really gets the hiring manager's attention if you have these things on your resume. Now, you're probably going to get overwhelmed because you're going to see all this information out there. You're going to see all these steps for foundation, advanced, expert, and you're going to get overwhelmed, right? Now, it's important to take a step back and really to take things just one step at a time, right? The ISTQB certification or the ISTQB information out there is totally free. So if you wanted to go ahead and try to study, you don't have to take prep courses or any classes as it relates to that. But I will say the classes and really taking these practice exams over and over again will really help you to be able to pass it the first time, right? And not only that, but it's important to understand the glossary and the terminology. So if you can really get the glossary and the terms down pat, then you're going to do well, right? In addition to that, the questions are going to be very specific, and the wording in the question is going to be very precise. And so this is probably where I have had the biggest challenge, and really other people have the biggest challenge, is understanding the verbs. So things like best, first, and accept. You want to make sure that when you're taking the test, you understand really what they're asking. You take your time, you read it at least twice to make sure you're understanding it before you answer the question. And so these are some tips that is really going to help you to pass the exam on the first time. The bottom line is you want to get certified. So you're going to hear all the noise. We talked about this at the beginning, right? You're going to hear noise from even hiring managers saying, I don't want to see people certified. But I'm telling you, from a person who's been doing this for 25 plus years, I want to see the certification. It proves to me that you're willing to have the discipline. It helps to understand the baseline of common terms, and then it also helps you know if you want to specialize in a certain area. And so to me, I recommend the CTFL, and then I also recommend one of these AI testing certifications. So this opens the door. This lets me see on your resume in about 8 seconds you have that. So it's important to make sure that not only you have the certification, but you're putting it in the right spot on the resume. So I would recommend not putting it at the bottom like most people do, but putting it towards the top. So if you have the certification, if your resume looks good, another thing that I tell people, make sure that you have no typos, because if you have typos, I'm going to throw that resume out. Now, if you have all these things, and if you get to my stack, I can tell you I'm going to take a strong look at your resume versus somebody who doesn't have the certifications, or maybe even doesn't have the later certifications. So I hope that this information is helpful. I'm going to be doing other deeper dives on the specific certifications, so you will start to see those. I'll probably start with the CTFL first, and then I'll jump into different videos around the AI certifications. But I hope this information has been helpful, and look for subsequent videos on the QA Revolution channel, and also like this video. And I appreciate your time, and I look forward to talking with you again soon.